Hey everyone, Mr. DVB here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite movies of 2022. For me, it was a great year for film. There was a ton of movies from start to finish. The entire year, it never felt like there was any dry spots, just constant enjoyment at the theaters with family and friends, which was really nice. 2021 was a solid year for movies for sure, but it felt like most of the movies came out in the second half of that year. First half was still very much so affected by COVID, and it really didn't feel like that this year, so it was a great time getting to see a bunch of films. In particular, the horror genre really stood out this year with a lot of really great movies from some big directors and some smaller directors. So that was a genre I wanted to give a shout out to because normally horror is a bit iffy, and this year it definitely killed, no pun intended. And yeah, had a lot of fun seeing a lot of films this movie, and as always, I do have a few honorable mentions. There's, like I said, tons of films I saw this year, so I want to give a few shout outs real quick. First one is going to be for Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. This is the second film in Rian Johnson's Benoit Blanc murder mystery franchise, and I had a ton of fun with this movie. I actually managed to see it during its very limited theatrical release. Don't enjoy it quite as much as the first Knives Out. I think that the writing isn't as tight this time around, and the humor in particular I found to be a little bit intrusive at times, but I still really enjoyed the characters and just the whole murder mystery aspect of it. Lots of fun. The Menu is a movie that really surprised me this year. Ralph Fiennes gives a fantastic performance as this movie's villain, and if you're looking for just a very well-made thriller film that's very claustrophobic and has some interesting commentary, I would recommend checking this one out. It's very well made. Tar is another movie that really surprised me this year. If you're looking for a very good character study led by a very well-done performance by Cate Blanchett, I would recommend checking this movie out. It's not necessarily the kind of film that I would rewatch a bunch, but it's very interesting, very well told, super well acted, like I said, and just a very interesting character study. All Quiet on the Western Front is an excellent war film. It is a remake of a classic World War I movie released in the 1930s, I believe. I've not seen the original version, but I thought this movie was great. It's interesting seeing a different perspective of the war, focusing on the Germans, and just how war is terrible for everybody. This movie in particular deals with the end of the war, so we're getting to see kind of how that came to a close and how that affected soldiers and whatnot. It's a really interesting story. You feel bad for the characters in it, and it's very, very brutal. And finally, my last honorable mention is going to be for Elvis. This is a movie that I was really considering putting in my top 10, but I do have quite a bit of issues with the first half of this movie, the focus on Tom Hanks' character over Elvis, and then Baz Luhrmann's style, which I found to be really obnoxious and over the top at times. But the second half of this movie really clicked for me. I've always really liked Elvis as a singer, and so getting to see his story and having Austin Butler give an incredible performance as him, absolutely nailing the look, the sound, the mannerisms of the man himself. He kills it in the role, and it all comes together with a very emotional conclusion that I thought was really well handled. So, still a really good movie. I just have issues with the first half, and that's why it didn't make it into my top 10. But with that being said, now let's talk about my favorite movies of 2022. So coming in 10th place for me is going to be The Black Phone. This is the newest horror film from director Scott Derrickson, who has given us movies like Sinister and Doctor Strange. He's definitely somebody who knows what he's doing with the horror genre, and I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It is actually an adaptation of a short story done by Stephen King's son, and it very much so has a Stephen King feel to it. The premise is definitely disturbing. You have a child who is kidnapped by this man played by Ethan Hawke and placed in the basement. This child, there's a phone on the wall, and when he answers it, he hears the voices of the previous victims of this killer. So they're trying to help him escape and give him clues and stuff as to how he can get out of the basement. Really interesting movie, very well made. Ethan Hawke is very creepy in the movie, and I just had a lot of fun with it. Or maybe fun's not the right word, but it was very well made, and I enjoyed it for sure. My only real issue, I guess, would just be that the final act or the conclusion I found to be a little bit anticlimactic, but still really, effective and eerie, and I enjoyed it a lot. In 9th place for me is going to be Pearl, which is actually a prequel to another movie that was released in 2022 called X, which is a film about a group of adult film stars who go to shoot a movie at this barn in Texas, and the two owners of the farm are these really creepy old people who end up killing them. So it's a slasher film, and Pearl is a prequel focused on the main old lady villain of X, except, set in like the late 1910s, and it's much more of a psychological thriller than it is a slasher film. There's still kills in the movie, but when they happen, they're much more personal, and so they're more disturbing and effective because of that. The movie is basically just about her downward spiral going crazy. She lives a very simple farm life, but she wants to be, a dancer on stage, making movies and whatnot. And we just see her go absolutely insane. Mia Goth gives one of my favorite performances of the year. She absolutely kills it in the movie. She is fantastic in the film. She's probably not going to get, nominated for like an Oscar, but she deserves it. She kills it, especially with the monologue that she gives at the end of the movie. It is really damn good. Just a very disturbing, eerie, and effective movie, and I loved the ending. In 8th place, we have a very big surprise, a movie that I would have never expected to be on my top 10 list, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I have not seen the first Puss in Boots, and I haven't watched like Shrek 3 or 4 in over a decade. But this movie caught my eye. I thought the animation looked really unique. It looks different from the other films in the Shrek franchise, less realistic and more cartoony and stylistic. And so that just, interested me, just seeing that kind of cool visual style. And then the fantastic reviews came out, so I saw it and loved it. It is super fun from start to finish. It's a hilarious movie. In particular, the first 20 or 30 minutes had me laughing a ton. Puss in Boots is just a character who works very well on his own. You don't need Shrek to help him out. He's just a very entertaining character. The voice cast does a great job. The villain, the Big Bad Wolf, excellent. One of my favorite villains of the year. Such a cool character. And the movie has a really good message as well, that it's well delivered and actually I think was really nice to see. So overall, very solid, fun movie that I definitely recommend checking out. In 7th place for me is going to be The Whale, which is the newest film from director Darren Aronofsky, who has given us movies such as Requiem for a Dream, The Wrestler, Black Swan, etc. So very good director, and this movie stars Brendan Fraser, which was the main selling point for me. I've always really liked Brendan Fraser as an actor. Growing up, I just saw a bunch of movies I used to love as a kid that starred him, such as the Mummy franchise or Journey to the Center of the Earth. And he hasn't really had much of a career over the last decade, so it's nice to see him appear in more things the last couple of years with things like DC's Doom Patrol, or he's going to be starring in Martin Scorsese's next movie, Killer of the Flower Moon. But this is his first big role since kind of coming back to Hollywood. He is the star of the movie, and he just does an incredible job in this film. His performance is fantastic. You really feel for his character. The movie itself is a bit more divisive. I've seen some people who don't really care for it too much. I can definitely understand finding the story a bit preachy, I guess, at times with his writing, but I personally really liked it. I thought that the performances were really good from everybody, but in particular Brendan Fraser, and it's just a very emotional story that comes to a great close. So really good movie, really recommend checking it out, and I hope to see Brendan Fraser take home some awards for this film. In 6th place for me is going to be The Fable Men, the newest movie from director Steven Spielberg, who is one of my all-time favorite directors. Just absolutely love all of his movies, or not all of them, but love a lot of his movies. And this is definitely his most personal film to date. This film is basically about his childhood and his teenage years. So we get to see him making movies with his friends and just what that was like, the really creative ideas he came up with and how he would execute those films. Those scenes always give me a lot of laughs and smiles and stuff. But then it's also very much so about the family drama and the issues with his parents' marriage, which I thought was really interesting, and that was the stuff that I actually liked the most, was the family aspect. So it's just a really good movie from multiple different angles, very well made, and I really liked it. Performances are great from everybody. The writing is good. It's a little bit preachy at times, I guess, with his love to cinema, but it's made by Spielberg. He's made so many excellent movies. I can give the guy a pass for that. Definitely think this is going to be one of the movies that takes home a lot of awards this year, and it definitely deserves it. In 5th place for me is going to be Babylon, which is the newest movie from Damien Chazelle, who has given us some movies like La La Land, Whiplash, which I absolutely love, and First Man. And this is a movie that is actually getting much more mixed reviews, which definitely surprised me because I loved this film. My brother said something to me after the movie, which I definitely agree with, which is that the first 30 minutes had him quite nervous or whatever about what the movie was going to be like. Didn't really enjoy the first 30 minutes. And I agree. I think the first 30 minutes or so of the movie are not the best, but once it starts focusing more on, just people making movies and stuff, it's a ton of fun. The movie is both a love letter to Hollywood, but also kind of a film discussing the problems with it. It's set in the 1920s, focusing on when, movies were transitioning from silent era to sound, and we follow three characters and basically how that change affected their personal lives and their professional lives. And I just thought it was really interesting. You have three great performances. Margot Robbie's great in the movie. Brad Pitt's great in the movie. The other actor, whose name I can't remember, is great as well. They all just do a really good job. The movie's very funny. There are some absolutely hilarious scenes. One scene in the movie involving Margot Robbie's character trying to shoot a movie scene, and there's a bunch of issues on set. That part was hilarious. And it definitely can be very chaotic at times. Mostly, like I said, the first half an hour is where I felt that. But just really well made, very interesting, and really entertaining movie that I had a lot of fun with. Surprised it's getting mixed reviews. Maybe it'll become kind of a classic in a couple of years. You know, that's happened to films in the past. Movies like Big Lebowski or Fight Club that were initially not received very well that have since become classics. I could see that happening in this movie because, you know, it does seem like there is a handful of people who do really love it and appreciate it, such as myself. But we'll see. Really fun movie, though. Really entertaining. In fourth place for me is going to be Avatar: The Way of Water. So I actually rewatched the first Avatar in theaters when it was released back in September, just to like refresh myself on it, because I hadn't seen the movie in probably about 10 years or so, and I wanted to hold off for the theatrical re-release just so I could have the full experience. And I realized how much I actually enjoyed the first Avatar, so my excitement for the second one grew quite a bit after that, and I loved Avatar: The Way of Water. I do think, from a story and writing standpoint, I would actually argue it is a weaker movie than the first. I think the dialogue is not the best. They say bro so many times, and there's a couple of characters who kind of annoyed me. But, purely from a visual standpoint, this movie's flawless. It looks incredible. The CGI here is beautiful. The world building's fantastic. Just seeing the water world and just all of these amazing visuals on screen, it's truly fantastic. I did not see the movie in HFR. I hate HFR. I don't know why some directors like it. I think it's stupid. But yeah, the movie looks great. The 3D is fantastic, and the action is incredible. The third act in particular is absolutely fantastic. There is some really awesome moments there, and I'm personally really excited to see where the future of this franchise goes, because I just thought this movie was a ton of fun. Alright, and now we're cracking our way into the top 3, my final 3 favorite movies of 2022. In third place is going to be The Northman. I forgot which one it was for a second. I have my list in front of me. The Northman is a movie directed by Robert Eggers, who made The Lighthouse, which I loved. It's one of my favorite movies of 2019, and I was really interested in seeing what he was going to do with a bigger budget and a movie that is focused on a Viking revenge tale. I mean, Vikings I find really interesting. Norse mythology is something I find really cool. So seeing all those different parts come together with a very good director behind it who knows what he's doing with camera work and stuff, I was definitely intrigued. And I love this movie. I think it's excellent. I think, not only is it a very good revenge story, but it's just super well made, well written, good performances. There's some interesting Norse mythology stuff in there, but nothing too much to the point where I think it's going to confuse general audience members. It's still a very straightforward revenge story. The action scenes or the battles or whatever, well, there's not a ton of them. When they're there, they're brutal. They're extremely well shot with all of these really long one-shot takes swooping across all of these areas. I've heard, Red Letter Media refer to it as like art house Gladiator, and I can definitely see that. It very much so reminds me of movies like Gladiator and Braveheart and stuff. And just really good overall, great performances, and I loved it. In second place for me is going to be Top Gun Maverick. This movie, I would say, is the film that has kind of brought back the Hollywood summer blockbuster feel, because for the last, while, summer blockbusters are typically just big franchise movies. Not that Top Gun isn't, a franchise, but, just movies like MCU films or Jurassic Park and stuff like that. So having a just, more kind of classic 80s, 90s feeling Hollywood blockbuster, it's nice. I mean, this movie blew up. I would argue it's the biggest movie of the year. Yes, Avatar made more money at the box office, but in terms of domestic box office, Top Gun is still the winner there, and I feel like this was the most talked about movie of the year. People were just talking about it for months straight. It was a huge movie that, was occupying IMAX constantly. Movies would go out of IMAX and then Top Gun would come back in. So it was just constantly there. Very big movie, and it's just a ton of fun. It's, a better movie than the original, in my opinion. I think it has more interesting characters, a more interesting story, and more of a threat. The final act in particular is edge of your seat, fantastic action. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know who was going to die, who was going to survive. It's super well put together. You have actual IMAX cameras in real jets, so the camera work here, the cinematography is amazing. Just a super fun blockbuster, and I mean, I don't even have to say check it out. Chances are you already have watched it. And finally, landing in first place for me, you guys know me well. It was my most anticipated movie going into the year, one of my most anticipated comic book movies of all time. Despite not being somebody who likes bats, I've always been super fascinated by this character. I am, of course, talking about Morbius. So this is it. Okay, I'm kidding. Obviously, it's the Batman. I could not wait for this movie. I absolutely love the character of the Batman. I always have. Just the world of Gotham, the idea of the character, the villains he has. I love all of it. And to me, Michael Giacchino, or that's the composer, he did a great job. To me, Matt Reeves has given us the most comic book accurate, or at least the most accurate depiction of the character that I like the most to date. I love the, darker, more noir detective version of Batman, and that's what this movie is. It is a detective story, very much so like Seven, but with Batman, where we're following this character trying to solve this murder situation where there is this really sinister villain killing all of these political figures and whatnot. Of course, it's the Riddler, played by Paul Dano, who is perfect casting. He does an extremely good job in the role as this very creepy, disturbing, almost like Zodiac killer or like Jigsaw from Saw type villain. There's like some really elaborate, creepy traps he has in this movie for people. It's a disturbing movie. It's PG-13, but it definitely nails the dark, disturbing feeling, and I loved that about it. The action scenes are great. I mean, the hand-to-hand stuff here is fantastic. The Batmobile chase is amazing. The movie looks fantastic. They nail the look of Gotham. Everything, like just from the way all the architecture looks to the fact that it's constantly raining, the lighting, the aesthetic, perfectly nailed. Catwoman, great character. Penguin, played by Colin Farrell, doesn't even look like the guy. The makeup's incredible. You get the point. I love this movie. It checked off every single box it could for me personally. If I had to think of like a couple of gripes, I didn't like the Joker scene where they're like in the asylum and Riddler and Joker are talking. That felt like an after credits scene that just got thrown into like the final act of the movie and kind of disrupted the flow of things. That's about it. I would like to see Bruce Wayne explored a bit more in the future, and I think that's the plan. I think that we're going to see him become more of that eccentric billionaire that Bruce Wayne normally is, because this is a different version of the character, right? In this movie, he is only focused on being Batman. So that's about it. Otherwise, I loved this movie. It was fantastic. It was super well made. It's 3 hours long, and it doesn't really feel like it to me. It goes by very fast. So The Batman, easily my favorite movie of 2022. It was a great year for film overall, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what your list is down below for your favorite movies of the year, and I'll see you in the future. I have a few more wrap-up videos coming out, such as my most anticipated movies of 2023, so look out for that, and I'll see you next time.